Hello. We're going to be talking about a little lighthearted topic today. Who is Cain's wife, right? Cain was Adam and Eve's firstborn, so he had to marry someone. Who was it? We're going to be answering that question today, right? The earth is now 7 billion, 8 billion people. A lot of people came from a small family. So how did that happen? Listen on to hear the answer.
We go as deep as we can go, look as hard as we can look, but we only scratch the surface of the meaning of the book.
Welcome to our podcast, in which we answer the 10 most Googled questions about the Bible. This is our fourth question we've answered. If you'd like to see the other three, please visit our website on YouTube. And if you haven't done it already, we would appreciate it if you'd hit the notification bell and subscribe. I am your host, Scott Moffitt, and I'm joined by podcasters Gabriel Penfield and Gary Karwoski. That's it. Our task today is going to be to answer the question which I'm sure you've thought about or heard about in the past, and that is, who was Cain's wife? Gary, who was Cain, first of all?
Sugar cane, are we talking about?
No.
Oh, sugar cane's good. Ooh, delicious.
No,
Cain from the Bible. That
Cain. The C-A-I-N, not C-A-N-E.
Yes.
I get so confused, about those things.
We can start over if you want.
That's the oldest son of Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So where did he get his wife from? Now, there are many difficulties in answering that question from the book of Genesis. First of all, the meaning of their names. The meaning of his brother Abel is... Anybody help me here?
Well, Abel means breath or sun. The first part, A-B, meaning source in Hebrew, and El meaning God. So almost like breath of God, source of God, from God.
Good. Excellent. And Cain means?
Not sugar. Right.
Not sugar.
Not sugar. Still not sugar.
It means I have acquired or I've gotten. So the idea here is of ownership. And does that imply anything to you?
Well, I think Eve named him. I have acquired a man-child.
Okay.
And that was like a new thing for them. And I don't buy it that, by the way, that they were twins, but that's okay. We may get to that.
Well, who was the firstborn, though?
It was Cain.
Okay, and Abel was the secondborn. So she kind of changed directions there from I've acquired a boy to this is from God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you already addressed, is it possible that they were twins? Most people say no, ain't no way. But some people do come up with another ingenious way of getting around this question by saying that there was a pre-Adamic race.
Oh, my goodness.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard that before?
Well, it's in the content of the material that we've been looking at, and it seems to me bizarre because there's no such evidence.
Yeah.
Right. And what would Scripture say about that?
Well, I mean, I've never heard this before. So the pre-Adamic, it's a race before. Is it kind of like following the evolution? Because I know you have the not actually 6 days. They're actually millions and millions of years of creation. Does it kind of follow that route, or is it explain it?
I think it was, maybe Gary can help me here, but I think it was more like God tried out something and it didn't work too good. So then he went to the second attempt.
Yeah, that's the original version. Mm-hmm. Okay. But what those proponents are saying that they continue to exist and Cain married into that, which is just, it goes against the salvation of Genesis 3:15, the that whole aspect of a coming Messiah. So,
and it's not in Scripture. I mean, we don't add to Scripture, as simple as that.
Well, the biggest argument against it is if there was two different races that are pre-Adamic and then the Adamic race, you'd have to have two different saviors, or Christ would have to die twice. So two redemption plans.
It's bizarre.
Yeah. So what I wanted to do next was to look at the Scriptures, and I've got them here printed out. So you want me to go ahead and read them, or one of you would like to read?
Go ahead.
One? Okay. Now the man had relations with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. And she said, I have gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. Again, she gave birth to his brother, and Adam was a keeper of the flocks. but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So it came about in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. And Abel on his part also brought the firstlings of the flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and for his offering, but not for Cain, for his offering had no regard. So Cain became very angry, and his countenance fell. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you so angry? And why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it." Cain told Abel his brother, and it came about when they were in the field that Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where's your brother? Where's Abel?" And he said, "I don't know. Am my brother's keeper?" He said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. Now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you cultivate the ground, it will no longer yield its fruit in strength to you. You will be a vagrant and a wanderer on the earth." Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is too great to bear. Behold, you have driven me this day from the face of the ground and from your face. I will be hidden, and I will be a vagrant and a wanderer on the earth. And whoever finds me will kill me." So the Lord said to him, "Therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance will be mine on him sevenfold." And the Lord appointed a sign for Cain, so that no one finding him would slay him. Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod,
there you go,
east of Eden. Now, what I saw here, what jumped off the page to me here was that Cain was the first plant-based eating human being in the whole world. He's Bill Gates' best friend.
You mean he ate like the Impossible Burger?
Yeah, he went to Burger King and got that. So what are the questions we need to consider about this passage in answering the question of who was Cain's wife? If all of humanity is descended from Adam and Eve, then where did his wife come from? We sort of touched on that a little bit already with the pre-Adamic race, but we're going to answer it more fully. And if Cain married a relative, then doesn't that smell of incest? And third, if Cain married his sister, then wouldn't we expect any offspring to suffer degenerative effects? So, before we begin to answer the questions, Gabe, Gary, what was Cain like?
What was Cain like? Well,
from this passage, what can we determine?
I mean, I remember it. So my whole life I've struggled. Is it Cain or Abel? Who's firstborn? Which one died? Abel is able to die. That's how I remember it. Abel is able to be killed.
I like
it. It's kind of blunt, but that's how I remember it, right? So Cain, we see here that he was more of a gardener, right? More of a gardener, while Abel's more of the hunter, worked with animals, killed animals, that kind of thing. Cain didn't like that he was rejected, right? He didn't like that he was being put to the side. His sacrifice wasn't good enough because it wasn't blood the way that Abel, his sacrifice was blood. So Cain got angry, he killed Abel, and he took a wife and had children. So the question we got to ask is, where did that wife come from? Was it a sister? Was it maybe a niece? That's the question we got to answer.
Well, go back to his character, though.
Yeah.
What kind of a man was Cain? Can you extract some things from this text and implicate something about his life, his relationship with the Lord, for example?
Hey, Scott, I took the liberty of looking up a couple New Testament references to Cain. And, we got 1 John 3:12, it says, "Don't be like Cain." That's probably not a good indicator of what his character is like. And Jude 11 talks about the way of Cain and relating him to a couple other nasty people that are in the Old Testament. So clearly we know from the New Testament perspective, the character of Cain is something you want to avoid and not be anything like. So he's a bad guy.
Would you say he had a bent character away from God?
I'd say so. Maybe arrogant, right?
Now, a lot of people have assumed that, and maybe rightly so, let's discuss this. Abel brought a sacrifice that was accepted from God. Now, it's not stated what kind of sacrifice you had to bring, right? But Cain brought one that was not accepted. What was the difference between the two?
One was a blood sacrifice. The other was not a blood sacrifice.
Well, that's what they did with them. But the first one was literally a sheep, right? Or was it a ram?
Yeah, that was some animal.
Yeah. Where do animals come from?
Their mommy.
That's literally true, yeah. But it's the procreation process that God put into effect. They come from their mommy. Where does plant-based things come from?
Well, clearly he was offering a works-oriented sacrifice.
He had to plant the seeds. He had to do the sowing and reaping, right? So, yeah, I guess that's the point that most people will approach this. One's a work-based, Cain, and one is a God-based because God provided the animal, right?
Yep.
Are you with me here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Abel didn't provide it. He just nurtured it.
So was
Well, that would be really weird, though.
So can we make any extractions from this text? Was Cain obedient to God?
At first, I'd say if it's not stated, so we don't know if like God clearly stated this is acceptable, this is not. But if it wasn't stated and you didn't know, the fact that he presented vegetables, that's not bad. It's his response to that's bad. His response of being arrogant and then
he's like a
killing his brother.
He was like a petulant teenager, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Well, how did he respond to God?
No, I don't.
Anger.
With sarcasm, didn't he?
Yeah.
Hey, it's not my job to watch him, right? Am
I've
I
used
my
that line
brother's
once or
keeper?
twice. I've used that line once or twice. Not great.
And then he's kicked out, and he goes east of Eden. Did you ever read that book? I think it was by Steinbeck, wasn't it? It was a movie too.
Yep.
With James Dean, I think. Anyway, hated the movie. He's sent to the land of Nod. I looked it up I tried to find it. I tried to find it, and the closest thing I got, I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, was can you see Eden on there? And
We can't, but hopefully the audience can.
Okay. And there's another map too that shows you it's easier because they're circled. It's sort of like looking at the maps that are of Ukraine right now with everything circled, the cities that are under siege, which we need to pray for the Ukrainians and the Russian people too as well. Mm-hmm. But he's sent to east of Eden. What does he do there, Gary?
Well, I'm not sure. I guess he tries to make I know what he does. Eventually, he builds a city.
He built a city.
He builds a city.
But what did the text say that God was punishing with? He was going to be a
wanderer.
So instead of wandering around, he disobeys God and he builds a city and he names it arrogantly, as Gabe has so rightly talked about, after who?
His son.
His firstborn son, yeah. Did Jesus ever talk about Cain?
No. Not that I'm aware.
Not anything in specific, but he did refer to the time. Is it refer? Yeah, refer to the time of Cain, and he used a statement called "in the days of Noah."
Yeah.
There was a great rebellion. Yeah. So, what did Cain begin a line that exists still today? Most Bible scholars will argue that he did. That he produced the ungodly line that has come down to us today. And he began the first, maybe false religion that's characterized by works, as Gary has so rightly pointed out, and the idea of stubbornness and being self-willed. So, okay, let's get now to the question, who was Cain's wife? What's the answer to it? It's a simple answer.
Well, he had to marry a relative. The question is, what kind of relative? How there's a lot of stuff to unwrap here, but how far down the line? How old were they? He could have married a sister.
No time frames are given in there, right?
Correct. We do not know. So it could have been a sister. It could have been a niece down the road. But even if it was a niece down the road, that begs the question that still a brother would have had to marry a sister.
Yeah, I don't see any way around that.
This is what time period is this according to the chronology of the Bible? They call it the antediluvian period.
Yeah.
And so one thing we know for sure, he had to marry a blood relative. Now that does not sit well with people. Why is that?
Well, it's illegal. Illegal nowadays. Very
Good.
illegal.
It's illegal to marry somebody too close to you. But why else is it wrong with people?
Caused a lot of defects, mutations, issues with children and with descendants down the line.
Well, we tend to go back and interpret the Bible through our own lens, right? We want to bring our mores and our attitudes and our views and project them onto the scriptures, right?
Yep.
Wouldn't you say that's true? I can't tell you how many times I've been asked by people as to why there's so much killing in the Old Testament. Well, that shows a certain disregard of history, the ancient practices of the day, and saying, well, it's not normal today, but it was something that was very normal in their day. Yeah. So when you look at ancient peoples through the lens of modern events and modern mores, you're going to come up with a skewed view of really what was going on. So when we look at this idea of who was Cain's wife and we say he married his sister or niece, everybody goes, oh my gosh, that can't be, right? Mm-hmm. But what do we know about Leviticus?
Well, Leviticus, the whole issues of not having to intermarry within the family, that came, so much later.
Yep.
Do you know how much later?
What are we looking at? 2,600 years
2,600 years later. Yeah.
So that prohibition was not in effect. That biblical prohibition was not in effect at the time.
But how long did people live during these days?
930 years, things like that.
Yeah.
Pretty long time.
Yep. So Gary, you and I are really kind of young at this point in time. Right?
I'm feeling younger right now. Yes.
You guys are barely out of your teens, basically.
Basically.
Well, I don't feel like it actually. Why did antediluvians live longer? Before the flood, people before the flood, why did they live longer?
Well, first, it was before God cursed, right, and said, I'm not going to strive with you for any longer than 120 years. And also, they were closer to Adam and Eve, right? The first perfect people, right? They were super close to them. Adam and Eve were perfect. And so that's
what do you mean by perfect?
Lived. Well, before they sinned, God created them without sin, right? God called them very good. And after they sinned, that's when the sin effects started. The sin curses started taking effect. And more, they've gone further and further from God, right?
If you want to find out who your ancestors were or, go back in your genealogy, what will you normally do? You'll take what kind of a test?
DNA test.
A DNA test. How was Adam and Eve's DNA?
It's perfect.
Perfect.
Without
0.
Without any problems.
Exactly. But as man lived in a fallen world, right?
Mm-hmm.
That DNA became corrupted. Imperfections just compounded one another over the years. And so people started living less and less length of time. So we have perfect people here. So 2,600 years, if you're living to be 900 years, doesn't take that long to get to the next generation, right?
My math's correct. That's only like 3 generations.
So most people look at Cain and say, oh, he married his wife or his niece? That's gross. All right. And it would be today. But as Gary rightly pointed out in Leviticus, that's when the prohibition came in. And how many years was it later? 2,600 years.
Long time. Yeah.
So,
and you see before Leviticus, before the Mosaic Law, Abraham married his half-sister. Isaac married Rebekah, the daughter of his cousin. Jacob married his cousins Leah and Rachel. Like you see throughout the Bible, there are closer marriages, right?
That's
so
right.
It's not just completely out in the open, like completely different. It's a pattern.
It was very common to marry your relative that was very close. Yes. And in fact, Abraham married his half sister, right?
Yep.
Or was it his half sister? And then what did he do when he got questioned about it by Pharaoh?
She's my sister, not my wife. I don't know. I'm not married to her.
Yeah, it's my sister. He claimed, which was true, right?
Yeah.
No, would anybody do that today?
I don't think so.
I don't know. So. I know the woman, but she's my sister. She's not really my wife. No. Yeah. So times were different.
Yeah.
Well, Scott,
right.
let's bring up the fact that there was a limited group number of people to intermarry with. You're just starting an entire human race. Obviously, there has to be some kind of a family intermarriage to continue the human race.
Exactly.
So there was really not any choice at that time if you were to continue humanity.
Exactly.
And so that's a factor.
Yeah, and just like that happened twice, Adam and Eve, and then you go down to Noah's family, right? But you'd have to marry sister. So I'm like thinking again, if we had to restart humankind, which we're not going to happen, right? From my knowledge. If we did, we'd run into problems.
Putin has his ways.
Yeah, we'd run into problems nowadays without the perfect nature, closer to perfect nature.
I think in the case of Noah and his sons and their wives, they likely would have married like cousins or something like that.
Yeah,
because there were 4 groups of families that were there at the time.
True.
But still, it's still close intermarriages.
Yep.
Yeah. Do we know what Cain's wife's name was?
Frida. I think it was Frida.
She was German.
Frida.
Not from the Bible, we don't know.
We don't know it from Scripture, but we do get some information from non-biblical sources that say her name was, what was it?
It's like Awin.
Yeah, I wanted you to
Avon
say
or Avon, just something like that.
Yes, and that he married Abel's. How did that go? I can't remember.
Seth.
Sister, right? Abel married.
Yes,
that was who knows?
Yeah.
We get that from the Book of Jubilee. Yeah, it was Awan.
Awan, yeah.
Like I think she wanted to go to Awana.
Something like that.
Awana. Approved workmen are not ashamed. Not quite the same.
Okay, how can we summarize this really quick?
Yeah, I'd say it's very simple. It's not crazy, right? The Bible's not contradicting itself. It's not incorrect because Adam and Eve, their children had to marry either a sister or a close relative. The Bible's not wrong. It could have happened.
We shouldn't go to crazy answers like a pre-Adamic race or any of that stuff.
Don't
right?
need that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even if all we said is untrue, God can work through miracles. God's all powerful. God knows what he's doing.
Plus, we know that there are no age specifications here. So it could be over a long period of time. It could be elongated from the time that he was born and the time he killed his brother to the time he married. I mean, we just don't know. That's the point. But we do know from, I believe it's Genesis 5:4, that it tells us that Adam and Eve had many, many sons and daughters.
Yep.
And they lived 930 years. You could have a whole bunch of kids. I don't think Eve went through menopause at 40 or 50 years of age. Do you? Maybe it was 400, 500 years of age, but so that's all I got. What do you want to add anything?
Yeah, nothing really to add other than to say this should not be an objection in people's minds to the scripture and the veracity, the truth, especially of the Old Testament. Again, I think a major problem, as you have already alluded to, Scott, and let's just review it here. You cannot read your current events back into the Bible. We learn that in basic interpretation of Scripture. You've got to go with what you have at the time, and you can't just read what you have today back into that. You're going to get yourself in trouble every time.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Gabe,
yeah,
anything you want to share?
We're living in a very different time, like you said earlier. People fighting all throughout the Old Testament, right? We live in a time in the world where fighting's not normal now. And then we take a look at Ukraine and Russia and that situation, and we see 6,000, 10,000, 15,000 people dying. That's crazy, right? That's more than we've seen in many, many years. So now we extrapolate that back in the Old Testament. And
well, as you know, Scott and Gabe, we're going to be dealing with that in about a month with an author about a just war.
Ooh.
And so that's on our plate for our podcast to deal with that very situation.
Yep.
There it is. War and Peace and Christianity. And so you're going to have to wait for about a month for us to deal with that one, but it certainly is appropriate and timely.
Yep.
The next time we meet, we'll be speaking with our fellow Dallas graduate by the name of Arnold Frutenbaum, and we're going to be talking about one of his many, many books, and he's an excellent author. It's called Jesus Was a Jew.
Yep.
But as we close, I'd like to remind you, Cain married his sister, or niece, which was totally okay at that time. We know from many other biblical characters, they also married very close relatives. It wasn't until 2,600 years later that God laid down a rule, because the DNA had become corrupted, not to do that anymore. So that's the answer.
There you go.
All right.
Nice and clear.
Like to say goodbye. Till next time, my name's Scott Moffat, and that's Gary Karwoski and Gabriel Penfield. And we look forward to meeting with you once again.
Awesome. Yep. See you later.
God bless.
Bye.